Super. So I'd like to thank you, Adrian, for joining us today. We're with Adrian Underhill and the author of Sound Foundations, and we're delighted to have him here to answer a couple of our questions from the diploma forums this week. Nice to see you, Adrian.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here.
Super. So let's jump straight in. So the first question is something that I often hear, and it's this question of, well, how teachable really is pronunciation, and isn't it something that students kind of pick up organically?
Well, quick answer. In a sense, everything can be picked up organically, and certainly our first language pronunciation is picked up organically. The trouble is that very properly our muscles automatize in the first language, and we get stuck with the phonetic set of the first language. And you can't just repeat your way out of that. Some people will pick it up more quickly than others, but most people do need some help, just as most people need some help with grammar and vocabulary. So it is teachable, and it does pay to teach it. If you can teach it fairly well, or rather help students to learn it fairly well. Of course, pronunciation, like others, does suffer from sort of blind alleys, ways of teaching that aren't terribly productive. Okay. So I think it is highly teachable, but you've got to find the right way to do it, which of course people like me claim they are just beginning to find out.
And if I said, okay, well, I believe you now, and I'm prepared to follow you, but I have a very limited amount of time. And if I had to ask you to help me make a decision about teaching individual sounds or teaching word stress and intonation, which one should I choose? Which one do you think is more important, or is one more important than the other?
I think in English, there's no doubt that word stress, or more exactly, word unstress, syllable unstress, is deeply important and really quite different from many other languages. And it is really where people do begin to slip up. But if you had limited time, what I would do is that I would take people on a guided tour, first, of all the sounds, so they could just see what's there. And secondly, I would help them to really discover that they can connect with the muscles that make the difference, and, if they wish, make a difference. Then they can be on their own. It doesn't take very long to show those things. You don't then have to nurse them through every single sound, but they need the basic DIY kit, which I think is that. They need to have the map of the territory open, and you just point out what's where, and then give them the map and they can go away with it. And they need to know that they can navigate around that map. Then I think they can, that would be the least that would be sufficient. Mm-hmm. And then probably, as you imply, I would then work quite a bit on word stress and stress in sentences, or, as I've said, unstress, because that really is the catch, the snag with English.
Okay, so maybe we'll put a pin in that idea of unstress and how we might work with that practically in the classroom, and come back to it. But I suppose a good question maybe now to deal with is the idea of when do we start, at what age should we start dealing with this?
It doesn't really matter. I mean, you just begin at the beginning. Whenever you get your students, start. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if they're 70 or 7 or what. Just get cracking as soon as you get them. Don't leave it, because there aren't, this is the weird thing, there are no non-pronunciation lessons. Every single lesson taught anywhere in the world by anybody is a pronunciation lesson, except they're just focusing on the wrong pronunciation, because by not doing it, they're teaching the new language with the mother tongue pron. And it's really hard to retrofit pronunciation, because the synapses are made, the pron goes in, the physical movements go in, the meaning goes in, the spelling goes in. It all wraps itself up in these wonderful brain synapses. And then you come in on Friday afternoon in the pron slot and you want to correct it all. Well, you can't just sort of extract bits of neuron and synapse and do it all over again. You can't get it right from the beginning, but you can feed in at the point of purchase of new word, new sentence, new vocabulary. You can feed in that there is work to be done here, and this is how far we've got.
Mm-hmm. So as soon as the language goes in, the pron goes in with it. These things go in hand in hand.
Of course it does. Yeah. It's all learned as part of a bundle. And in fact, it needs to be learned as part of a bundle, because the richer the bundle, the more memory hooks there are with it.
Mm-hmm. I suppose then the question is, if we're thinking of young learners, and literacy issues and alphabets and introducing a new set of symbols. If we are talking about very young learners, do you think the chart still has a place in a very young learner's?
Oh, the chart definitely has a place. I mean, the chart is a way of thinking about it. People that say, I've done the chart, it's wrong. I've taught the chart, it's wrong. You don't teach the whiteboard, you just use it. The chart is nothing more than a whiteboard for prom. You don't teach it, you use it. And actually, it's quite hard not to teach with a whiteboard or a blackboard or stick in a dust. You need something as a way of helping learn. Most people find very quickly they need that. And the prom chart is that for prom. As for the symbols, well, I suggest that you use the symbols. Not because I think, I never ever teach the symbols. I would never teach symbols, but students learn them within a few hours because they are using them. So we're not trying to memorize symbols. We're trying to memorize what is it that I'm doing in the mouth, in the lips, in the jaw. We're trying to, and what is the acoustic result? When you find that thing, that sound, then you can begin to have a name for it, and a symbol or a color or a position. Any is as good as any other. A symbol, of course, you can use in a dictionary, so it has got a certain advantage. With kids, I'd use that just the same. Here's the chart, and when people look at it, they're not looking at that symbol or that symbol or that symbol. It's a place. If I were to work with this chart and it has the same number of squares, but they're all blank, we can work just as well. People just work by position. It's not the symbol that they're looking for. So the symbol is a kind of afterthought. We're not teaching symbols. We're not teaching phonemes. We're teaching acoustic experiences linked to a muscle awareness. If it's kids and you don't want to have symbols, well, take their shoes and set them out. If you're doing vowels, set them out according to the vowels in the front of the class, or let the kids stand in that position for a few moments and each take on one of the sounds. It's just a way of organizing. It's not the thing. It's a map. It's not the territory.
So for you, actually, the layout of the map is a much more important thing than the symbols themselves.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yes. The symbols are irrelevant. I mean, in Spanish, you don't even need symbols. You just have the letters of the alphabet, more or less, or well, more rather than less. And in other languages, I'm sure it's the same. But in English and in French and in German and in other languages like that, there are multiple ways of spelling any sound. Therefore, you do need something to get hold of. And students need to know, hey, guys, there's only 44 of them. Half of them you've probably already got. And the rest are very closely linked to each other. So it doesn't matter where you start. Start somewhere and you can start to find all of them pretty quickly. But the message is, and this is a question you're going to come up with a bit later, I think, they need to be learned as a whole because they all affect each other. It's one bundle. It's not 44.
So I guess that's the question is, some people say feed them in bit by bit, drip feed them in. Your approach is very much teach the whole lot.
It's holistic in the sense, put it this way, with pron, you need all the sounds from the beginning. With grammar, you can sequence it. With vocabulary, you can sequence it, and it more or less works. I mean, there are holistic approaches to those two as well, but arguably we can say a linear approach works. With pron, you can't have a linear approach. Whatever you do, you need all the sounds from the first lesson. So instead of getting into them wrongly and refraining from attacking certain sounds until year 2, let's just get them all out on the table. And we learn them, we cover them all, we treat them all. All of them are up for grabs, all of them are up for improvement. But we work with a whole lot at the same time. And gradually all of them improve. Rather than this one and this one, these two. And this week is just focusing on those two. By all means, you can have focuses, but all the sounds need to be in circulation at the same time because, especially with the vowels, every single vowel affects every single other vowel. Each vowel is the edge of another vowel, which is, and it marks the boundary of yet another vowel. Whatever one is, the next one isn't. And you need them to work together. You can't really, you can work on them in isolation for a few minutes, but then they have to go back into context.
Okay. So I guess
that's a view. And I say, therefore, holistic.
Yeah. So I guess we've looked at how that approach might work with teachers with young learners who are concerned about another set of symbols, and that they can use the map and not necessarily use the symbols. And there's lots of ways to potentially fill those boxes with other things. Somebody else asked a question about higher level learners who've never used the chart before, and potentially may have resistance to it. And I think it's something that I encountered as well in my teaching higher level students, going, well, we've never used this before, and now I'm starting to question whether I trust you as a teacher, Sinead. What are you doing bringing in this thing that I've never seen before? How might I approach those students in a way that to kind of encourage them to use it?
Well, I think the first thing is to say, well, what you don't say is it's a pity you've never seen it before, but it is a pity. And the first thing to say to them is, you're not learning this chart. This chart, just the same as you're not learning a grammar book. You know, you're learning a usage. And this chart is just a way of looking at the sounds, many of which you already have. But if you want to go on getting better, and if you want to go on more and more comfortably understanding others, and if you want to go on more and more comfortably being intelligible to others, then this is a focus you need to work on. And the chart is just a very, very simple way of systematizing the whole thing, the whole map, everything that has to be done. But reassure them, you're not learning this, you're not learning the chart. The chart is just a tool to show you what it is that you need to do and how they relate together. It's a way of looking at it. And it'll help you, the advanced learner who's never yet thought of it before, to think of it. It's a thinking tool.
And what about the context then of rolling enrollment? That's a difficult one. You know, you have maybe month-long courses, people popping in on week 2 and week 3 and week 4. And how do I make that chart then? Well,
one of the problems with rolling enrollments is that we teach in a linear manner. And the people that come in week 2 have missed week 1, and week 3 have missed both weeks 1 and week 2, and so on. But if you take a more, and course books are rather stuck in that way, but it's not the only way of teaching. You've already mentioned immersion and pick it up as you go along. And I've mentioned a holistic approach. Now, pronunciation, I think you really do have to use a holistic approach for all sorts of pedagogic and reasons to do with the topic itself. Now, people that come in, if you're working on everything, let's say, I mean, all the sounds during week 1, you know, whenever you touch on it, you're open to all the sounds. It doesn't mean to say you're working on all of them. It just means you're open to all of them. And perhaps you've had a few moments of looking at most of them. People come in week 2. That's all right. Whatever happens is the syllabus. Whatever they need is the syllabus. Everybody will need it. It's not that people who were there in week 1 won't need what's happening in week 2. Of course they will. Everybody needs it. It's just that you don't sort of do a great big, okay, guys, here's a massive presentation on the sound E. You're not doing that. So whoever comes always needs more of it. You know, you go on a bird walk. Just because you did that bird walk last week doesn't mean you don't need to do it again. It's useful. You're learning something.
Yeah.
Think of a problem as a bird walk.
Yeah. Okay. We have another question about cued articulation. Someone wanted to know if you are familiar with cued articulation and what your thoughts are in terms of its use in the ELT classroom with teaching.
Well, cued articulation comes from speech therapy, and there are hand signs for each sound. And I think we do need to mention jolly phonics because that comes from phonics. And if I just take that first, and remind me if I don't get back to the question you asked. You see, people have found that the way they teach pronunciation doesn't work. So the first rationalization is to say we don't need to do it. The second rationalization is to say, actually, we only need connected speech. But, and it's true, connected speech is what it's all about. But if you want a beautiful ballet, you work with movement number 1, movement number 2, movement number 3, and gradually you string them together, not because you want the movements, but because you want the flow. It's the same with sound. You have to look at the individual things in order to be able to string together and get a beautiful flow. Now, if we go to phonics, people have now say, oh, phonics must be the way forward, but it isn't. Phonics is how you teach people that already have the pronunciation, the complicated spellings of, in this case, English. Now, all the phonics tricks are good when you have the pronunciation. It's not a way of teaching pronunciation. It's a way of teaching spelling if you already have the pronunciation. Now, when you go on the Jolly Phonics website, you'll find that the research that requires them to actually have pronunciation teaching, they import something, a kind of phonology. Jolly Phonics is not PRON teaching. Of course, it can be linked with PRON teaching, and what they're doing is extremely important because there are multiple spellings. So I'm not knocking it for a moment, but I'm just saying to people, don't get confused between phonics, which is for native speaker learning difficult spelling, and learning the pronunciation, who indeed also need to learn the awkward spellings, but they're not going to have much of a chance until they've got the sounds. Sounds come first, not spellings that come first. So if you're really working without much speaking, perhaps you would start from phonics, but actually sounds come first and complicated spellings come second. So yes, have phonics, but don't think it's teaching pronunciation, because it isn't. They use hand gestures for sounds. Cued articulation does the same, coming from a slightly different angle, that of speech therapy. But in both cases, much more to the point than having certain, I can't really do it here, certain sounds, certain signs that show sounds. The most important muscular association to have is with the lips, the jaw, the tongue, and the voice. And that is an internal kind of choreography, because those are the muscles that make the difference. It's not this that makes the difference, or the sign that you do. That's fun, and kids like it. And maybe it helps because it gives it another mental focus. But the primary muscular association we need is, what is it that's inside? It's the sense of what you're actually doing with your muscles. And that's what I try to get across in this approach.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that approaches like cued articulation may be an extra hook, and my extrapolation there might be maybe in contexts where gesture is culturally incredibly important, let's say Italian speakers, maybe the connection of that physical external gesture would be just another hook, but the focus always has to be inside here.
Well, I mean, I use gestures too a lot, and so I'm not going to argue against gestures. I think they have a lot of use. I would say that my gestures do more to trigger the muscles that make the difference, the muscles that we're after, than the ones I've seen on either cued or Jolly. But fine, if it helps, that's great. That's cool. But the main gesture that we're really after is to trigger the internal muscles, to reconnect. It is what I call the proprioception. That means the sensing of what inner muscles are doing, which we had as babies. And we've got to refine that in order to be able to make new sound, to escape the habit, to escape the grip of mother tongue sounds. And to escape that grip, we need to refine those muscles. And there's only 4 of them: lips, jaw, tongue, and voice.
Well, speaking of the grip of mother tongue, my mother tongue being a little bit different from yours, and thinking of those kind of varieties of accent. I mean, I remember the first time I did my very first transcription, looking at my Irish accent on the page and sort of having a bit of an existential crisis, wondering who I was and how anybody ever understood what I said. And I think sometimes teachers can be very concerned about the difference between what's on the page in the published materials and who they are in their own accent and their identity and what they're supposed to bring into the classroom. So there's my next question for you: is what do I do when what's in the book isn't representative of my accent? That's a problem. Okay, so that's a problem of the book. It's not a problem of you. And what I say to all teachers, native and non-native, and of the native, those from all different regions, whether it be a native variety of English like mine or yours, or an American one, or an Indian one, or a Nigerian one, or an Australian one,
or the multiple second language varieties of English to everybody. Teach how you speak. Very simple. Teach how you speak, and expose your students to lots and lots of other pronunciations, which is now these days very easy to do. And in fact, the kids are mostly doing it themselves already online. But draw their attention to it. And if there's another teacher in the school that speaks differently, get them to notice that. In each lesson, because you're working with the muscles, students can very quickly get to sound like that, to use that sound or that sound or that sound. Sound American, sound British English, sound like a speaker trying to speak your mother tongue. They can do that just by fooling around. So get them to inhabit different pronunciations, because not because they've got to speak it, but because they've got to listen to it. And the mouth educates the ear. So get them to play with different pronunciations, and by way of getting them to listen to lots, but show, hey, this is how I speak. And when we're together, I'm going to teach you naturally my pronunciation, but I'm going to show you lots of others. And in the end, you, the student, can choose how you want to sound. It's not exactly as easy as a fashion accessory, but it's not so very far different.
But if I'm drilling, Adrian, don't I end up sort of feeling guilty that everyone sounds like me? So somehow my classroom ends up like a little kind of pronunciation cult where this Irish accent is coming back at me, and somehow I'm like, am I serving these students well?
It's not wonderful. It's just how it should be. And when you see that, and you just be genuine about, if you're struck by it and amused by it, share that strikingness and that amusement with them. And when other accents come up, get them to play with those too. One of the obvious big differences, of course, is with those that say the R when it is spelt, that is erotic pronunciation, and those that don't say the R when it's spelled, non-rhotic. So in my case, I don't say the R unless there's a vowel following it. In your case, you would say it regardless of whether there's a vowel following it or not. And the same goes for West Country and Scottish and American and multiple other varieties around the world. And that's one of the easiest ones that students can play with. Get them to do it and to not do it. Lots of materials have my kind of pronunciation, which is actually quite a minority pronunciation, but that's just a piece of history. Now there is no value given to any one over the other. There's a new kind of value, which is comfortable intelligibility. Can you understand others comfortably? Can you be understood comfortably? Because those are the two big things. And for that, we have got to be in touch with our pronunciation muscles so we can adjust them. And as we adjust the way we sound, we also, because it's built in, adjust the way we hear. And we become more able to hear other pronunciations. I don't know if that was very clear, a bit of a ramble, but I'm saying teach how you speak.
Yeah. I think, in reality, when I think about my own practice, the more comfortable I got teaching pronunciation, the less stressed I got about it, and the more I realized that I'm a tiny part of the patchwork of my students' lives,
exactly.
Their English language lives, and actually, the more they become aware of it, the more they would come into classrooms with something on a phone, going, "What is that, Sinead?"
Yes.
And they bring it more into the room. The more
you get them to enjoy it. It's just such huge fun to notice these differences, grammar and vocabulary as well. But it's most obvious and easiest to notice with pronunciation. Get them to notice different pronunciations of their own language, people in their own country. Get them those different pronunciations of English, and even amongst the staff of the school they're in, perhaps. I think it's huge fun and terribly helpful to them to realize that actually, in the end, they can sound like who they want to sound like. Pronunciation isn't that big mystery, actually.
Fantastic.
It's only that we don't have very good teaching methods, by and large, because we use repeat. We think that you can repeat your way out of a habit, and it doesn't work.
Well, that's a wonderful segue into the classroom. So maybe let's spend a couple of moments thinking about the classroom, because these.
Can I just add in that one of your questions asked about ELF?
Yes.
And personally, I think I admire the whole research that's going to ELF. It's very, very interesting and very well worth doing. But I wouldn't go there, and I wouldn't advise people to. I'd say find out how to work with pronunciation. Don't just start chopping bits off because you think it's too difficult. Mm-hmm. It's not. Pronunciation is a system. It is a complete system. You can't make a system easy by hacking bits off it, because the system dies. You hack bits off a rainforest, it gradually goes out. Language is a system too. and everything feeds everything. The more you cut off it, the more other problems you're going to make further down the line. People are still going to have to listen to those sounds that you're no longer teaching. And since the ear and the mouth are like two ends of the same neurological stick, they both affect each other. I think it's very important to keep it fully in circulate. So I would not go for the ELF solution to that.
Yeah, super.
Sorry, about to say.
No, let's maybe spend the last 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes or so. Maybe let's jump into the classroom.
Yeah.
And so these teachers doing the diploma are now starting to think about assessed lessons and starting to think about their 60-minute assessed lessons, but also I guess their own day-to-day 60-minute lessons and how they might integrate pronunciation teaching into those 60-minute lessons and how they might integrate it into their plans and what's a good way to go about that. Maybe if you could give them some practical tips.
The way I do it, which is probably a way that people will give people a bit of pause for thought, and I recognize that therefore people may not want to do the same as I do, and that's fine. I like to work with the chart for the first lesson that I meet them and take them on. That's upside down. You can also have it that way around. I like to take them around the chart and just say, okay, guys, these are the sounds, help them to make them. And by the end of that, they can see what they can make, what they can't make, which ones they know, which ones they don't. And that's the lot. There aren't going to be any more. There aren't any surprises around the corner. Mm-hmm. And then we just get on with the lessons. And as PRON things come up, we deal with them. Now, for me, dealing with a pronunciation mistake does not mean to get it to be correct and then hurry up and sit down before you get it incorrect again. It's like taking everything forward a little bit at a time, working on everything gradually, but you don't suddenly solve it. It's a developmental thing. You don't suddenly solve a sound in a lesson and then forget it in the next. You work on a sound in this lesson and you need to work on it more in the next and more in the next and more. And gradually there comes a point you don't need to work on it. So teachers, the student may get the sound now in this moment in this lesson, but of course it'll be gone by next lesson. Of course it will be, because it comes and it goes and it comes and it goes, and gradually it comes and it stays. It's the same when you learn anything, typing or knitting or musical instrument. You get it and then you've lost it, and you get it and then you've lost it. Gradually you get it and you don't lose it. And the teacher needs to know that and foster that and be with that process so students aren't impatient with each other or themselves. So I would take them on a guided tour of the chart to start with, mm-hmm. and let all sounds come up as needed, of which I just choose one here or one there to get it in context and help them to speed up. But if you go to my book or my website, there are lots of other ways of introducing the chart. You don't just have to go through it for 40 minutes like I do at the very first meeting. You can just include it as it comes along with a bit of vocabulary, mm-hmm. or when a sound comes up and you're working, you just say, oh, by the way, that's this sound here. Another sound comes, you say, oh, by the way, that's that sound there. And then the next lesson, what was that one? Do you remember? Because that's the sound that you were working on over there. What was it? Okay, let's try and find it back again. Let's try and find it back again. It's a developmental thing. So mm-hmm. included. But the thing is, if you work on a sound, you then place it on the chart, it doesn't go away. It's still there. Mm-hmm. Maybe the exact right sound isn't, but the experience, the name of the experience is still there. You can point, which refers back to an experience. If there's no chart, which is the case with nearly all classrooms, nearly everywhere, the sound comes and it's gone, and then where is it? Mm-hmm. Wherever you look, it's not there. It's not anywhere. It's not there. Do you remember that sound you did? Well, no. What sound? It's not anywhere. We use a whiteboard for grammar and vocabulary precisely to catch things for a while so they stay put while we do some work with them. That's what this is. It just catches something and it stays put for a bit while we work with it. The big thing, of course, with this is that you can string sounds together to make words. Or if you start with a word, you could then say, okay, this word, let's say chair. Now in my English, chair is two sounds. Chair. You say, how many sounds is that? Chair. Okay, which sounds is it? What's the first one? What's the second one? Can you say chair? Okay, in your language, maybe it's three. So and then you take them a little tour around there. Mm-hmm. So get the word. This is a way of working with a chart, different from how I do it. when there's a word, get them to say it. How many sounds in that word? They then got to work out. I mean, it's a great question. Great question. You know, take the word Hastings, where I am right now. Hastings. How many sounds in that word? Okay. How many syllables? Well, there's 2. Hastings. Good. Okay, that's 2 syllables. Now, how many sounds? Well, I make it 7. Okay, students might get 5 or 4 or 6 or 8. That's fine to start with, and it's great. Just the exercise of splitting up how many sounds are there. Then once we've done that, we can actually say, well, what are those sounds? Yes, and we make them separately. Now, let's see if we just track those sounds on there. So learning every word, if we just stop for a moment with 1 or 2 words in the lesson, not every word, and just track it on here, it's amazing how very quickly, in very few lessons, students have become familiar with this. They haven't learnt it because we're not teaching it. Like I said, you don't learn a whiteboard, but you do learn your way around a map. I don't know if that answered anything.
No, that's lovely, and I think a nice pointer there for teachers who are working maybe in a freelance space or in classrooms, as you say, that haven't got phonemic charts in them, is, well, get one in your bag and carry it around, and maybe just the notion of taking it out at the start of the class and putting it on the wall.
Yeah, and not in order to work with it, but in order that it's there if anything comes up.
Yeah, that this is.
Which it surely will.
Yeah, this is part of the room.
Are you there? Okay.
I'm still here. Have you got me?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah.
Yeah, super. Maybe just before we finish up, we'll get back to that question of unstress, and how teachers might deal with that in their classroom. Some ways that some ideas you might have for helping them work with that with students.
Well, most unstresses are 3 vowels: schwa, shwe, and shwo. I, and o. And those sounds are nearly nothing. Schwa is kind of as near to nothing as you can get. And it occurs 50 or 60% of the vowel sounds in in English are like that. I think it's very important to work with those unstressed vowels and to get to recognize them in vocabulary when we're learning vocabulary. So let's start out with word stress, because it's actually the same kind of thing, and word stress is a good place to practice it. So you learn a new word, Hastings. Well, how many syllables? Well, there's 2. Where's the stress? Okay, all that stuff. We usually do that. What's the vowel in the first? Okay. Now, what's the vowel in the second? Well, it's I. Is it big or no? It's not. It's very small. Okay, it's I. So we say Hastings. That's great. Okay, let's get it wrong. What would be if we stress it the wrong way around? Would it be Hastings? Or it wouldn't be, because the unstressed vowel would change. So it would be probably reverts to spelling. Hastings. And after a while, become even a schwa. Stings. So you take any word you're learning, intelligent. How many syllables? Intelligent. Okay, teacher, 4 syllables. Yeah, okay, right. Where's the stress? Well, it's on the second one, intelligent. Let's put it on the third and see what happens. Intelligent. Oh, what happens? Well, first, that third syllable makes a quite different sound, intelligent. I'm making it up because the word doesn't exist, but I mean, and secondly, the one where the stress was in the second syllable has become unstressed. Very likely schwa, but not necessarily. And then you get students to really notice and play with the difference between those 2, because you don't just hammer through a word, stressing every syllable. You go through a word unstressing at least half of them and changing the sound. So what teachers need to pay attention to is how the sound changes when you stress it or unstress it. And the way to do that is to teach the word as it is, but also play with the word as it isn't. Put the stress in the wrong place and get them to notice it and be amazed that it's completely unintelligible when you put the stress in the wrong place. So if I say to my student, look, here's a phrase which you all know, but you're not going to recognize this only because I put the stress wrong. And here it is. Paquette of potted toe crisp. Paquette of potted toe crisp. Work with that. Paquette of potted toe crisp. Now, you know what that is.
No, I don't.
But you can do it with any little phrase. Just put the stresses there. A paquet.
Pocket.
A paquet de potato.
No, you're putting me on the spot now.
Okay. Well, anyway, a packet of potato crisps.
Fantastic.
So
Super.
all you do is, and it just illustrates, and you can do it with nearly anything, it illustrates what happens when you put the stress wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, with stress and unstress goes sounding the vowel more fully, or in one of the very few reduced forms that there are, mostly schwa.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start doing that as part of learning the word, because when students repeat back to you, let's say the word intelligent, they're repeating it back to you, but they don't know that they're putting the stress in the second syllable. You've got to help them to know that by getting them to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get them intelligent, well, where is the stress when I say it that way? And when I say it this way? Well, which one is English? Well, it's that. Then they know what they're doing. And so that's one approach. That's one approach. As part of vocabulary learning, teach stress and unstress. That transfers, of course, to connected speech.
Super. So the notion that they would tell you what they're doing rather than us as teachers just taking it as face value, they're all doing it right so they can do it, so let's move on to the next thing, isn't necessarily the best approach.
You put your finger on possibly the most essential thing in all of teaching, which is to put something in front of them and to use the teacher's time and energy in seeing if they've got it, not in telling them what it is. Mm. So everything needs to be them not only making the choice, but looking in themselves to see what they're doing to do it. Then we start to get to useful teaching.
No, we could be here a lot longer. Adrian, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
Really, some really great stuff.
Well, thanks very much, Sinead. Let me just say, invite all of your participants to go to my website, adrianunderhill.com, where they'll find a whole lot of about 70 or 80 posts on different aspects of prawn, and it's plus a whole lot of reference to various videos, all of which is freely available, and they're welcome to go there and have a look.
Super. Thank you so much for your time, Adrian. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Sinead, thank you very much. Good luck to you, and good luck to all the participants on your Trinity diploma.